Hi everyone, I'm Linda Aravallo and I'm the Digital Marketing Manager here at Salt and Light Media. I'm so happy to welcome you to our first episode of Hope from Home, the show where we bring you stories of hope from our home into yours. This program is part of a social media campaign that we began a few weeks ago as a response to the current world crisis. Most of us are stuck at home with the limitations that we have. The idea is to showcase individual stories of how people like you and me are finding hope during these difficult times. I'm working with a team of Salt and Light producers. You'll see some familiar faces, as well as we'll introduce you to new members of our family, like myself. Today, Noel speaks with teacher Joe Nonato and learns what struggles he and his students are going through. Then, our new associate producer, Luisa, connects with Louise Escoban, who is trying to run the young adult ministry in her parish. And finally, Deacon Pedro speaks with singer-songwriter Chris Bray. Of course, all of them will tell us where they're finding hope from our home to yours.
Mr. Joseph Donato, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Problem. Now, as a religion teacher at De La Salle College in Oakland, in Toronto, how are you and your students managing during this time of quarantine period?
Well, it seems to me that the students are managing quite nicely. We spent a lot of time there, the teachers, trying to learn the new platforms of teaching online, and the students are adopting to it quite quickly. Remember that the online platform in electronics is a language that they speak more than we do at the older ages, so they've adopted to it quite quickly. Although, I think that they're also starting to miss each other, in the physical, proximity of having classmates and teachers and whatnot. So they've actually, the words have come out, and from what we hear, that they actually miss seeing the teachers, missing the classrooms, and miss being at the school. So.
Wow. So as a teacher, how do you continue with the students' extracurricular and formational activities?
Well, as you know, I'm a religion teacher, but one of my other duties at the school is also to be the commandant of the De La Salle Cadet Corps. And that's our extracurricular activity there, which is that program. The Cadet Corps is a youth leadership training program. And so what we have planned for the upcoming weeks, since we don't know when we're getting back, is to continue on with their training, at least in theory, So we can't do all the practical things like cadets do, like learning how to make rope bridges and tying knots and doing first aid and whatever. So we're going to have to teach them the theory online. So it'll be a bunch of lessons that we could use on the equivalent of Zoom or other, social media platforms where you can teleconference or video conference one another. So keeping in touch with the kids is great that way. We had a meeting the other week there with all the other kids, and we're talking about how we're going to be striking the plan forward, and they were looking forward to it, right? And progressing. Again, I think that they're kind of craving that being together, the togetherness of being a team and being part of something, right? So,
as a religion teacher, it must be difficult to evangelize during this period of imposed virtual classroom, no? How are you doing it?
It is, because you don't have the opportunity to do that personal one-on-one, right? You don't when you're sitting there at the beginning of class at De La Salle, we always say a prayer, and at the end of beginning and the end of classes, and every single day at De La Salle, they gather the entire school, and I think this is a very good LaSallian practice. We gather the entire school into the auditorium, all 600 plus of the students and all the staff and the teachers, and we get together for the morning assembly, which has the national anthem, and then a teacher leads us in a reflection. We're all together, right? So that whole idea of family. You can't really get that right now because obviously we're online. However, the school is pushing forward and keeping up that pace of the morning assembly, but just doing it virtually. So the principal this morning, with our first one, started off with the sign of the cross there, and gave us a bit of a reflection from yesterday's gospel and talked to us and reflected about the cardinal's comments there in his homily, and passed it on to the students. But in terms of the formation, it's there is a bit to be lost there because we're not standing in front of the students and they can't see our facial expressions and our body language, and they can't see certain things. However, it's kind of an unprecedented time that we're living in, right? Where 25% of the world is kind of shuttered indoors. We can be very grim about this whole thing, but we can shake our fists at the sky and saying, why has this been dealt to us? Or we can be very, very thankful. And I think that, there is an opportunity here. So the time of challenge that we have comes really with it, a silver lining. As a teacher, I know that I have the privilege in some cases to spend more time on a daily basis with the kids than some of the parents do, like from on day to day. So one parent commented to me that once a child goes to school, it's like we really don't have 12 years with them, right? From kindergarten, grade 1 all the way to grade 12 before they leave for university. It's more like we have 12 summers with our kids. And unless we actually carve out, maybe the 1 to 2 weeks there for that special summer vacation or whatever, then really the number of weeks that we can actually count with our children is very limited. But here we are in this very unique situation where the family is all together. And so here's a great opportunity for families to actually get together and play board games and get to know one another and make memories, make new memories. I know I have a really close friend that one of his things in the family is about making new memories during this time of being stuck indoors together, right? So going to about evangelization, here's a great opportunity for evangelization. Now, I've been a religion teacher for about 2 decades now. We know that good lessons are actually sort of reflected at the dinner table when the parent asks the child, hey, so what did you learn today at school? So sometimes the child will say, what I learned in religion class is this, that, or the other thing. And so it's an opportunity through the child for a religion teacher to sort of like reach the family in that sort of evangelization. But you're passing the baton on to the child, and the child sort of brings it to the family. But with this whole thing of the online environment that we're in, it's like this is a really unique situation where we as teachers can actually go right into their living rooms, right? And be in their family rooms and be at the dinner table with the students. And oftentimes we know that some of the parents are actually in the background because sometimes they live in a small home, and while the child is on the computer doing his or her classes, the parent is just on the other table there, like doing whatever work from home as well. And so therefore they get to hear what the lesson is that we're teaching. So it's a great opportunity for us to not only reach the kids, but also to reach the parents. And so therefore there's an awesome opportunity for evangelization. But we also know that, the church is a community, right? We saw this right from the very beginning of when Christ sent out the 72 disciples, right? He sent them out 2 by 2. We know that God, when he created Adam, knew that it wasn't complete until he created Eve. So it's kind of like God's message to us, we were created to be together. And so, with all these families all separated into their homes, we're kind of clamoring towards that greater community. And as I said at the beginning of our discussion here, some of the kids are looking forward to having this thing over and then getting back to their friends, even though they're talking to them online or they're doing WhatsApp with them or whatever, texting each other, they're still missing that close proximity to one another. But we as a church are the same thing. And so here's an opportunity as well where, we've had more masses being recorded online or live streamed where you have priests and bishops and cardinals that are recording their homilies, and these homilies are getting streamed into the actual living rooms of all of the faithful. So what an awesome opportunity for a teacher to be able to say, hey, you know what? Don't forget to go to Holy Mass, and then copy the link and then paste it onto a lesson or put it into a bulletin board or whatever, a virtual bulletin board for them to take a look at. And so then, I've heard one comment where, from our brother, where he said that he was talking to one priest, and on one Sunday Mass, there was 57,000 people that logged on, or 57, I guess, computers that logged on, which basically was much more than any kind of Sunday Mass that they would actually, be able to expect in terms of attendance. So the spirit of evangelization, the opportunity of evangelization is growing far and wide. And here, oftentimes we say, when is the last time that a brother or a priest or a nun or, somebody spoke to you in your office while you were doing your work, unless of course you work at a Salt and Light or something like this, to talk about Christ, But here we are, while they're doing their work, sitting on a computer, their child is listening to something like the homily for a Mass or a religion lesson or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so therefore evangelization is being brought to our homes. So it's a great and exciting time. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So one last question for you, Joseph. What gives you hope in these times?
Well, there's a comment from a famous American World War II general, or as we like to say it here in Canada, the Second World War, right? General Patton. And General Patton made this comment like, there are no atheists in foxholes. In other words, when things get real and people are dying, and there's a randomness to the realization of the finality of our lives, people tend to pay more attention to the last things, heaven, hell, purgatory, and judgment. And they say that, by the end of this pandemic, we will all know somebody who's either gotten sick or who's passed away from being a victim of COVID-19. I know, like in our own family, I had a cousin that who was working the front lines as a doctor, who ended up contracting the disease and ended up dying just the other day. And so God rest his soul, but this is a story that is being replicated in all sorts of different families. So death is not far from all of us, right? And so there is a chance for us to sort of like look at it and say, you know what, and to reflect on the finality of our own lives and to see what we have to pay attention to, what is in store for us once we cross the threshold, right, from this life to the next, and when we face our Lord in the particular judgment, right? Mm-hmm. However, we know that God is good, and so Romans 8:28 tells us that we know that all things work together for the good for those who love God, and we also have confidence that God gives us this, this goodness, and He has a plan, and that there is a goodness that is in God that has a depth and breadth that far surpasses anything that we can perhaps understand. So maybe this time perhaps is giving us, like, in the end, Christ will be a part of people's lives. People will take out their Bibles and dust them off and pay attention to a bit more. Maybe all of these links that we're giving to them about the online masses, maybe they're actually going to go to mass a lot more. Maybe there's the students who are actually receiving some of these messages are going to go and reflect them back to their parents. And then perhaps the suffering of the sick will win salvation for the many of those who have not been together with Christ for a long time. And perhaps, on a human level, perhaps people will be forced to think of others more and to act in true charity, right? And then we will take less for granted what we actually have here, or what we're entrusted with here in the Western world, especially for those of us who are living comfortably right now. Now, perhaps families, as we were talking about earlier, are going to get a chance to reconnect. And since the family is the basis of society, which is it has an opportunity to get that re-inject, that maybe, we're looking at a horizon that's going to be far more optimistic than we were looking at, where everybody was kind of looking inwards and not really thinking outwards in terms of charity or their fellow neighbor or whatnot, right? Mm-hmm. So in the end, we have no idea what Christ has in mind for us. But if we pay attention to in the stillness of our hearts, we can probably find the good. So there's a lot of hope here in the future.
That's great. Thank you so much, Joseph, for speaking with us today. And thanks for sharing your perspectives on these dark times. I wish you all the best.
All right. God bless you too. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks.
Louise, it's so good to have you with us today. You're the founder of the Chastity Over Coffee Ministry, also known as COCO, at Merciful Redeemer Parish, a community that meets regularly to discuss important topics surrounding chastity. So how is the COCO group continuing its ministry during this pandemic?
So typically how we operate is we have our meetings in person. We usually meet in somewhere with a lot of food, at a cafe over coffee. The point is to create this environment where we can have honest discussions about love and chastity and build trust within our community. But luckily for us, the pandemic hasn't disrupted too much. We've moved to having online meetings, and it's actually been good for us because we've been able to expand, further out in the GTA and reach a bigger audience of young adults who would like to come out and have discussions with us, but aren't able because they're not able to be there physically. So, using online meetings has actually been really good. And also we're hoping to launch a new part of our ministry called COCO to Go, which is a resource that allows our COCO family to have their own guided discussions amongst their own groups of friends.
Wow, that's amazing. Incredible to see how God is really working through this ministry, even in this uncertain time, and how you guys are continuing to build community even while everyone is staying at home. So that's incredible. So as you mentioned, everything is converting to the online community, the online world right now. So how do we make sure that we don't consume content that's not perhaps fruitful to our souls?
So I think discipline and balance are really important things. Discipline, especially in our daily prayer life. So with many of us staying at home, I'm sure you've heard it's been said a lot that it's important to keep with a routine. And that also extends to our prayer life. The more that we consume of God, the easier it will be for us to avoid unfruitful content. So we have this opportunity now to invest in more quiet and silent time to really be with him. We have more time to start to, to invest in reading scripture, and we have a real opportunity to go closer to God, and that in turn will help us to grow in purity and chastity. So we want, to have that time for discipline and balance, especially. We can't just do one thing for a long time because we have all this time to, stay at home and not do anything. So we need that balance, and part of that balance is being able to incorporate prayer into our life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a good point that you brought up, that we do have a lot of time for silence right now, and I'm sure a lot of us are maybe scared or uncomfortable with silence. But it's important to note that Jesus is still in that in silence. So beautiful. So we've been hearing a lot of words like panic buying and hoarding and stocking up, but one of the ways that we can really cultivate chastity is through fasting. So what advice would you give to people who are in that mindset of, consuming and, hoarding?
Yeah. So from what I think, fasting teaches you discipline. And I think it's really necessary it teaches you what's necessary and what's not necessary, and what's important and what we can live without. Like now that we're coming out of this time of Lent, we're in Easter. We're in this kind of new world where Jesus has given us so much, and he sacrificed so much for us, and all this panic buying and stocking up and hoarding, it can, in this pandemic, it can come up as really selfish. And when we're deprived of things that give us comfort and things that were taken for granted, we can't really afford to be selfish, especially in this pandemic. We can't afford to just think about ourselves. We're all called to die to self, just like Jesus died for us in the cross. And right now in this time of the pandemic, it's really important for us to think about the people around us and what we can do and how we can help them. And, hoarding up, panic buying, being selfish and keeping all these things to ourselves is not part of that plan that God is calling us to.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to keep in mind that as Catholics, we are called to, as you said, die to self.
Mm-hmm.
So lastly, what has this period of isolation really taught you about love and relationships?
So for me personally, I think it has taught me to be patient and to really trust in God. It's given me a new appreciation for the relationships I do have with my family and my friends. And it's really taught me that God is still doing a lot of work in my heart. He's still doing a lot of healing in my heart. And I think he's healing a lot of people right now. So right now we're in isolation. We're facing a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stress, a lot of temptation. But ultimately, we're called to really trust and rely on God. A lot of my comforts are gone. And that includes being able to access a conveniently located adoration chapel. But being away from the chapel doesn't mean I can't love God where I am. I'm called to love God where I am. And I'm also called to love my friends and my family where I am right now, especially in this period of uncertainty.
I really love how you put that, love God, to love God where I am. So I hope that everyone tuning in can really hang on to that message that we're called to love God literally where we are, even just in the comfort of our own home. So thank you so much for joining us today, Louise. And I really admire your efforts to continue this ministry, and blessings upon you and your family.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
I'm very happy to have Chris Bray joining me now from his home in London, Ontario. Chris, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So I'm thinking some of our viewers are familiar with Chris Bray. Some maybe are seeing you for the first time. You're a singer, songwriter, Canadian, Catholic from London, Ontario.
Yeah.
You look very young, but you're not. You actually have 5 daughters.
That's right.
The oldest one, she's grade 5 or grade 6.
Yeah, she just turned 11.
She just turned 11. So you guys, you're all at home now. How is this last couple of weeks has been for you guys?
It's been different. Uh, it's really interesting. At first, I think I personally I had a lot of anxiety and just the fear and the uncertainty and how long and I think as this has progressed, it's kind of just brought some more peace to my heart. Just being home with the family, having this time, and just kind of shifting my perspective and changing the way that I've been looking at it.
Can you tell me a little bit about specifically that? Because I think a lot of people, it was the opposite. They started with some peace. It was good. It was deepening their Lenten experience, and then it's like we have no idea how long this Lent is going to last.
Right.
Where are you finding the peace?
Well, I think, if I were to start back with my fear and the anxiety, it's, this is what I do full time as a ministry, travel around. And so for me, like the busiest season of my entire year was just indefinitely canceled, So I think initially it was kind of like, oh my goodness, like what does that mean? What's that going to look like for my ministry? How's it going to look like with, like providing for the family and all of those thoughts, right, that run through our minds. And then I think just as this time has progressed, I've been a bit more intentional in shifting my focus in the way that I've been thinking about things and looking at it more as an opportunity. Like, when am I ever going to have this opportunity to have this much time together as a family? Probably never. And my kids, they're still kind of young, but yeah, they're eventually, in a few years, like they'll start to get out of the house and as they graduate high school, and like what an opportunity that is, really. I know it's not under the best circumstances, obviously. But when I started to change that mentality, I think it just created a bit of a shift internally for me and just allowed me to grasp onto that peace, from the Lord.
Did you and your wife struggle with trying to explain what's happening to the girls?
No, I don't think we struggled with it. We're always trying to be sensitive to make sure that we're communicating things to their age level that they're going to understand without creating any kind of unnecessary panic and fears and worries of their own. But we're pretty forthcoming with them. Like, this is what's going on. There's lots of people that are sick. We need to pray for them. And so let's come together as a family and do that. And it's been really cool to see that part of our family. We had already prayer and family devotional practices that we do, but now we have more time. And so we have the ability to try new things and see, let's dive into the readings more each day. And not just maybe doing one decade of the Chaplet of Thy Mercy, but let's pray the whole thing. And so we've been trying these different things and singing praise and worship songs together as a family and doing little mini family liturgies. And through all of that, explaining this is why we're doing this, is because of the circumstance that we're in right now.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think that for most Catholics it's gone unnoticed that this is happening during Lent. Did you? I presume that you guys as a family have Lenten rituals or practices that you do. How have those helped, or have you developed new ones, or what have you been doing as a family?
So I would say what we've been doing as far as our prayers and devotions, that hasn't changed as much, except obviously we can't go to our home church and participate in Mass and liturgies and Stations of the Cross and that sort of thing. But I think what it has done is it's we have a tendency as Catholics to unplug our brains a little bit to the action that we're doing, whether it's in the Mass and we're just reciting words and we're thinking about something else, or you know what I mean? And so I think what this has done for me and for some of us in our family is it's made us a bit more intentional of saying, like, oh, we're not able to do this. And so instead of complaining about it or thinking negatively towards it, let's embrace this and recognize that, hey, this is the cross that we have to bear, and we can offer this up to God. And so, no, we can't go to a fast food restaurant right now, or we can't go and play at the park. We can't go to school. We can't see our friends. But instead of dwelling on that, we can really actually grab hold of it and make it more functional for us, in our prayer and spiritual life.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is in a way. You started off by saying that this is the busiest time for you. This is how you make a living. This is how you support your family.
Yeah.
You have no idea when you're going to be doing concerts or events again. I know you've been doing some from home and you do videos and online. Tell me about how that adjustment has been for you.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because I feel like God has called me to a ministry where he's placed me in front of people to be able to lead them closer to him through the stories that I tell and through praise and worship music. And I know in the beginning it was really difficult for me. I felt like I was out of sorts. Like I didn't know, like, what am I supposed to be doing, right? Like I'm supposed to be right now, today I'm supposed to be in front of 1,000 people, and I'm sitting at home. Like God, what's going on? And I think it was difficult for me as I was wrestling with that reality. And so I just decided, well, if I can't be in Thunder Bay or in Calgary, Alberta, or wherever I'm supposed to be, I'm just going to be at home, and I'm going to turn on my phone, and I'm going to do a live stream, and whoever wants to join along as we pray together and praise and worship God through song, then we'll do that. And the response has been tremendous, because I think people, in the absence of being able to be part of a faith community, they're seeking relationship, and they need something to fill them up. And I know I need that. And so it's cool to see people come together in that. When technology works, it's an amazing thing, right?
It is.
What a gift in our era that we live in. So.
It is. We're finding the same thing at Salt and Light. That's how this program kind of evolved and came to be. And I also find that because we're forced to do it differently, it's actually nourishing our spiritual life differently in a way as well. Chris, I know that you're going to sing a song for us, and I know that you picked the song because of the message of hope, but tell us a little bit about that. Introduce the song, and tell us if there's anything you want people to listen for specifically in that song.
Yeah. I chose my song All Things, and I wrote it with a buddy of mine. His name's Dan McCauley, another worship leader, great singer and songwriter. And I chose this song because I think it is applicable to the circumstance that we find ourselves in. The wondering, the how long, and what's going to happen, and the fears and all of that. And it really echoes that passage in Romans chapter 8. The Apostle Paul says, he works all things for the good of those who love him. And though this may be a road that we didn't choose to go down, that God might be putting us to the test and testing our faith. And he invites us, even though it's uncertain, that we trust in him and follow him wherever he leads us.
Okay, well, good. That's a good message. I'll let you get your guitar, and while Chris gets ready there to sing the song, I'll introduce you, I guess. Here's Chris Bray with All Things from his album, Beloved Child of God.
Planned every step I've taken before my feet ever hit the floor. You've been good, I've been blessed, and I know there's more. But when the path you placed before me is a road I would never choose, will I go, will I trust, will I follow you? You're here with me, you know my every need, you're working all things for good. You have led me beside still waters, through the valley you shadow me. You are first, you are last, you are in between. You're here with me. You know my head.
And that's all for today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Hope from Home. We want to know where you are finding hope during this time. If you have any positive and inspiring stories to bring hope to the world in these unusual circumstances, be sure to share them with us by following Salt and Light Media on all of our social media platforms and commenting your stories with the hashtag #HopeFromHome. If you missed any part of the episode and you'd like to watch it again, go to our website, saltandlighttv.org/HopeFromHome. Thank you for watching, and we hope that these stories inspire you to stay positive and remind you that we're all still connected together through hope. From our home to yours.